Hello viewers. Population, policy and issues. This forms the subject of today's discussion, the second part of our series. In the last part, we saw that the dimension of the problem was huge, that it bred specific kind of problems in its wake, and we concluded by saying, asking ourselves, what is policy in India gearing towards in terms of dealing with these questions. To continue the discussion today with us, we have Dr. Kumud Pore, eminent economist, to tell us how far the government or policy makers have been aware to the question, what has been the direction of implementation of that policy, and what remains as questions to be tackled. Dr. Pore, there is a popular notion among the people, especially abroad, that India seems to be quite unaware about the immense population problem that faces it. Now, is this true?
That is totally wrong, because the Indian leaders and thinkers have been really so conscious of this problem even before independence. In 30s and 20s, we had a number of societies which were counseling for birth control and propagating birth control. In progressive states like Mysore, there were special family planning counseling clinics opened by the Maharaja of Mysore. Madras University accepted on academic level in the medical education a course on family planning. So, one cannot say that we were not aware of it. Not only that, but even the political leaders were quite aware of it. For example, in the 1939 Tripura Congress, when Subhash Chandra addressed the people on the possible problems that independent India will face, he highlighted the problem of population. And in 1940, there was a committee which was appointed by the Indian National Congress to go into this problem. And one is surprised to see that this committee had a holistic view in examining this problem, and issues of age at marriage for girls, social security, health and of the mother and the child, quality of life of the common man, all these issues were touched upon by this committee. So, it is not true that we are not aware of it.
So, you mean not only after independence, but long before, different people have been in fact alert to this question. And how about subsequently?
After independence in 1951, we officially adopted the population policy, and India was the first country in the world to officially accept it as a national policy.
That's quite admirable.
Yeah, and at the same time we had also accepted the economic development as a policy and started planning, economic planning for economic development. So, our population policy and economic development policy have to go hand in hand, and it is a two-pronged approach. On one hand, we want to control numbers so that we can plan better, and secondly, we want to plan so much such as to control the numbers better. So, it is a two-pronged approach.
So, you mean the policy makers have in fact, whether in terms of social thinkers or politicians, have long been aware to the question?
Yes.
Now, the obvious question that will be asked thereafter is that if there has been this awareness, how has it manifest in terms of programs or their implementation? What has been in the general direction of thrust?
Well, plan after plan, we have been allocating more and more funds to the population policy, and most of it is through health services. Up to 1962, sterilization was the only method perhaps which was given to the people. But after 1963, you have the IUDs like copper T and Lippis loop, also the pill has come. So, presently one can say that there is a sort of cafeteria method, in the sense that everything is available. You have sterilization, you have intrauterus devices, and you have also the condoms, and you have also the pills, and this during this cafeteria anybody can choose whatever he likes. But even today 65% of the people choose sterilization. So, spacing of children is not considered to be as important as the termination of the childbirth.
During the same period, however, we are talking of the last some decades, it is also true that India has been supposedly growing and developing. Not just that, so many budgetary allocations have been made apparently into family welfare, meaning family planning. Now, in which case then what is the achievement at the end of all this?
Well, at the end of 40 years, you can say in 1991, we have around 145 million eligible couples, which means whose wife is, where wife is less than 40. Of these, only 44% of the couples are protected and the rest are still unprotected. Now, this achievement is quite low, and why it has happened so? There is a good reason for it, because although economic development is said to be the best contraceptive, and we had that as another important prong of the population policy, economic development at the aggregate and average level only does not help much, because the fruits of economic development have to reach the household. The problem is felt at the macro level, but the solution lies at the micro level. In India, for example, we have had extensive increase in agricultural output. Even the per capita availability of cereals has increased from 470 grams per day per person to 510 grams per day per person. But the equal distribution is not equal, and the 1974 conference on population at Bucharest brought this point to the front, that family planning has shown better results in countries where not only there is economic growth, but there is more equal distribution of the development among people. Like for example, in Brazil, although the level of economic growth is not as high as in Singapore or in Taiwan, the population policy is more successful in Taiwan and Singapore even with a lower rate of growth. So that the distribution of economic development is as important as the scale of economic development. So, although we have developed a lot, it only means that we have not been able to see that the fruits of development reach the people. In India, for example, if you see, the poorest 10% spend only 5% of the national expenditure, and the richest 20% spend more than 40% of the national expenditure. So, that shows the inequality in income distribution, and family really tries to have accept small family norm for its own interest and not for the solving the population problem of the country.
Yes, you put it earlier very well. This, while the problem is macro, the solution is at the micro level, which means the family. You mentioned earlier, Dr. Pore, a figure that despite so much input, actually the coverage is only 44%.
Yes.
That is not even half the eligible couples. Now, why is it so low, and what has been the direction it has been taking?
Well, as I told you just now, it is mostly because of the unequal distribution of the fruits of economic development. But even among these 44%, there is inequality in the sense that 76% of the couples are protected because the wife is protected, and only 24% of the couples are protected where the husband is protected. So, the policy is directed to women more, and even among women one can see that 83% of these women are protected because they are sterilized, and only 11% accept some other devices and 6% have pills. So, actually not only there is inequality in income distribution, but even in family planning methods women are concentrated upon, and the men, although the vasectomy is much easier and much less painful than the tubectomy.
Yes.
In 91, of all the sterilizations that took place, 93% of the sterilizations were sterilizations of women.
So, you are saying women become the target, so almost the singular sole or principal target of the population control policy. Now, is this wrong?
Well, if they are made targets only of family planning and population policy, it is certainly wrong, because if you take care of a woman only as a mother or only as a childbearing human being, then it is wrong. You have to take care of women right from the beginning. Now, in India, girl child is neglected. If you see the death rates of children below 4, the death rate for girl child is much higher than the death rate for boys, young boys. Or even if you take the death rate from 5 to 9, there also the girls die much more than the boys do. So that children are neglected, girl children are neglected right from the beginning. So, if a malnourished, undernourished girl child is taken care of only in the case of maternity, that does not help much. And even if you take the maternity issue, you will find that in states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, hardly 20 to 25% of the deliveries are attended by trained personnel. The rest are just taking place in the household. In Kerala, 91% of the deliveries taking place are attended by trained people. So, even as mother, the health facilities are not extended to all the women. Most of the poor women do not have any medical attention during delivery. So, woman has to be treated as a human being, and she has to be really taken care of right from the beginning in health, in education and in employment as well.
Where is there, we clearly see therefore that women have been wrongly targeted, but could you highlight by giving us some figures to show where women have been attended to properly as human beings, where they have had a chance to gain education, be earners, empowered in general? Does it reflect in terms of their natural ability to therefore control the population, or so to say reduce or restrict the number of children in that family?
Well, the results are quite clear. Even in our socio-cultural milieu, you will find that the number of children born to women at different levels of education is vastly different. For example, in India, illiterate women on an average have 5 to 6 children, whereas graduate women on an average have 2 children. So that, and it steadily declines from 5 to 2 with rising levels of education. Similarly, you will find that the educated children, educated women, educated mothers can take care of the children much better, and this is reflected in the death of children below 2 years of age. In case of illiterate women, 138 children die below age of 2, whereas in the case of graduate women only 28 children die below age of 2. So that it does mean that education helps, a significant change in the general attitude, and the less the death of children in the family, the better is the, you can say, motivation for family planning.
Well, since there was so much overwhelming evidence available in terms of what can happen if the woman is attended to properly, and if policymakers understand that, you know, since the solution lies at the micro level, it should be addressed to differently. Do we find in the course of now so many progress over so many decades that this change of perception is reflected in the policy and policymakers?
Well, yes, the governments are getting sensitive to these issues, and if you have seen the recent advertisement on the Indian DD1, the government is making an appeal to the people to send their suggestions for family planning and family welfare to the health officers and to the even secretaries of the health department.
So, people should tell how best to do it.
Yes, and that realization has been there particularly after 1994 Cairo conference, where it was really brought to the forefront that if women are taken care of as a girl child in terms of health, education, employment, she will be a better decision maker in determining the size of the family. And actually all these things are important because the size of the family cannot be determined independent of the state of the economy. In any society, the size of the family is determined by the economic level of development and the activities that the families are undertaking, their level of productivity and the needs of the family. In fact, in most survival or subsistence working families, the free labor from the family members, particularly women and children, are sources of net income, and therefore, restructuring of the family just through target setting and family control, birth control cannot give you much results. Actually, the concomitant efforts have to be made for restructuring the economy. In our economy, for example, we must make efforts by rearranging our priorities in order to see that the fruits of development are reached to the common man, and we have to see that the quality of life is improved for the common man. We have also to see that the efficiency of health service is improved, and unless all this takes place and the quality of common man improves in this country, in whose hands it is to control the numbers in our economy, family planning methods are not going to be of much use. We have to remember that it is the common man in the country who will determine the size of his family, and through that the size of population in our economy.
So, if I may sum up, the micro will determine therefore the macro. The restructuring of the family cannot take place without the restructuring of the economy, and in this restructuring, policy must focus itself into the improvement of the common man, of the individual family, where the woman is better off, and that automatically translates into a better family reproductive norm.
That is true.
Well, viewers, over the course of today's discussion, we have travelled a lot, starting from the fact that almost now 100 years, Indian policy makers, whether as social thinkers or as political statesmen, have been aware to the question of the population crisis. Not just that, they have acted too. There has been a policy evolved and programs have followed. But what we did see, and what Dr. Pore explained to us, was that there has been a specific thrust in this policy which has forgotten for the moment, or certainly has not given as much importance to the role of economic development, a development that reaches the individual family, as it has to controlling biologically through the use of IUDs, sterilizations, the family numbers. And in this focus, the woman has been the target. But what we saw is that that alone does not hold the key to success. It is where the woman is more educated, more empowered, more enlightened, that you have automatically a smaller family norm. Armed with this much information, it is to be hoped that subsequent policy follows the course and learns from the information now available. Thank you.